Hello and welcome to the Indie Author Podcast. Today, my guest is Beth Daley. Hey, Beth, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm very pleased to be here.
I am pleased to have you here and to give our listeners and viewers a little bit of background on you. Dr. Beth Daley is a novelist, cultural and creative writer, editorial advisor for Europeana. We're going to be talking about that more in a moment. And new writing mentor in Europeana's Digital Storytelling Festival online creative residency. She has a PhD in creative writing, runs a range of writing workshops, and her first novel is Blood and Water. And so this conversation is going to be, it's for all of you folks who love to go down the research rabbit hole. And even if you don't, even if I think this is going to be one that's going to be fun for readers as well as writers, because Beth, you and I got to talk about this a little bit, but we're going to be talking about Europeana as a resource for writers and for anyone who likes to research stuff. So Beth, let's just start out describing what Europeana is and what the resources are that it offers.
So Europeana is a website. It's a website that is funded by the European Commission. And what it essentially does is it brings together collections from museums, galleries, libraries, archives across Europe and a little bit beyond into one website. So that's collections that have been digitized. So that means they've had pictures taken of them, or they've been scanned, or there's even some 3D models in there as well. So there's all sorts of things that you might find in a museum or a library on this website. But there's also a lot more because as it knows, if you go to visit a museum, there's only a small selection of the things that they have, which are visible to visitors. So they have a lot more stuff in their archives. And some of that is being digitized. Obviously not all of it because they have so much, but some of it is being digitized. And then that digitized material is shared with Europeana so that you can go into the website and you can search for something and you can get results from, a tiny museum in rural Estonia next to something from the Rijksmuseum in the Netherlands or the British Library. So you've got all of these different resources that you have it at the tips of your fingers. And it's important to say that this is funded by the European Commission, so it's all free. So you can go on there and you can use this right away. And it's europeana.eu. which I'm sure that we can share a link or write somewhere because it's a bit of a tricky one for spelling if you're just hearing it. Writers have used libraries for as long as libraries have existed. Libraries have always been in place. People can go to find inspiration or to research a topic or to find a nice quiet place to sit and write or to find a sense of community. So why not use an online resource for exactly the same reasons? So that's what Europeana is really great for writers. So you can search the collections for inspiration. There is all sorts of wonderful artworks. There are videos. There are audio files. There are, of course, books and texts and random objects from sort of all over the place and on every topic you could possibly think of. So if you want some inspiration, you could look at maybe our most popular items. You can find those on one of the pages, and that obviously changes every day or two. So you can go back and always find something new there, which is really good for like a writing prompt. If you wanted something to start off your writing session, you could go there or search for anything and find something that inspires you, sit and write about it for a few minutes. Or if you've got a particular research question that you're looking to find out about, I don't know, maybe you're writing a novel that's set in 17th century France and you want to know about fashion or food or whatever it might be, you can search the collections and see what you can find for that. So it's mostly for inspiration or for research. You can, of course, also use the artworks and the images that we have there as illustration or as cover art even. So it's important to tell you then that there are about 60 million things on Europeana. And of that 60 million, about half of them are licensed for reuse. So that every single item has a rights statement. So you can see what level of use you can make out of it. So whether it's in copyright, and therefore you would have to go to the copyright holder for permission to use, or it's public domain, which means you can use it any way you like straight away. Or there are a few rights statements in between that have different levels of permissions. And there's information on the site that shows you what all those things mean. But what it essentially means is that half of those items you can use. So you can take an illustration and you can use it in your magazine article or maybe for your cover art. Or you can make a collage of different things and have your bespoke cover art all made from European cultural heritage for free, which would be amazing. So there's a few different ways that you can use the collections. And then on top of that, we run events and have specific resources for writers. So we have just set up the Europeana Writers Room, which is a monthly creative writing workshop online for free. We have a different theme every month, and we use the collection items as inspiration, so as ekphrastic prompts. So we will do a few warm-up exercises, and then we'll do some free writing, and nobody has to share anything, but you can if you want. But that's proving to be really well received and really great fun. So you can have a look and you can join us on the first Wednesday of every month for that.
I was not familiar with the term ekphrastic prompt before this
Okay.
conversation. Can you talk a little bit about what that means?
So it's a big word that just means using an image as inspiration.
Okay.
Simple as that. So we'll show an image, and I might give a text prompt as well, like a phrase or a word that relates to it. And you can use either the picture or the phrase, or to be honest, you can do whatever you like. You join the workshop, it's your writing. But yeah, an ekphrastic prompt is using the image as inspiration for your writing.
And can we just go back a little bit to something you said earlier? Did you use Europeana for research into Blood and Water, your own book?
I actually didn't, because I didn't work for Europeana when I wrote that. When I did a PhD before I joined Europeana. So I'm afraid I didn't. I did trying to use Europeana for some research for the second novel that I've been writing, which is a ghost story. And I was looking at things like it was Victorian ghosts in British, very specifically British Victorian ghosts in Yorkshire, which is where I live. So I was looking quite specifically for things like foods that were available to a normal Victorian family. And I was looking at newspapers and for things like memento mori photographs, which are Victorian photographs, which I think thankfully there weren't many on Europeana, because a very British thing, and Europeana is much wider than that. Yeah, I certainly do. And I try, if I ever want to do some writing and I'm a bit stuck and I don't know where to begin, I quite often will go to the galleries, which are collections of things that either our teams or members of the public have created themselves. And I'll just pick a picture that speaks to me and do a little bit of free writing to get going. So that's how I would use it personally as a writer. And I run freelance writing workshops as well, so outside of Europeana, and have used Europeana's collection several times for that, including things like writing for well-being. We did a session about, the masks that we all wear, the different personas that we wear. And so I went to Europeana to find literal masks that we could use as prompts for writing. So there's just all sorts of topics, all sorts of ways of getting into the collections and using them for whatever you need to, really.
If people go to Europeana, would you recommend, do you have tips for how they should search for things? Like if you were looking for information on Victorian era ghosts, can you share some examples of the kinds of searches you would put in to find what you were looking for?
Well, it's just a basic search field like you would find on anything else, really. So you can start with that. You put in a word. But quite often what you find is that gives you, like I said, the 60 million items. So that can give you thousands and thousands of results, which is too much, really. So then what is your friend is the filters. So there are so many filters that you can narrow it down by. So one of those filters is the right statement. So can I use this? Are you looking for something you want to literally pick up, take and put somewhere else? In which case you want to look for, can I use this? Yes. But besides that, there are things that come from different countries. You can narrow down by country. You can even do a search. You can narrow your search by color. So let's say you're looking for stilettos and you've got lots of stilettos and you want red stilettos. You can narrow it down by color and only have red stilettos returned to you, which is quite fun. There is an advanced search as well, which is designed more for the sort of academic researcher, which has all sorts of ways of drilling down into the metadata, which is all the additional information about an object, about the digitized file. But if you don't know what you want to search for, there is a page called Collections, and that is a way of browsing rather than searching. So you can go to that and you can follow one of many, many links on the page. So you might find you want to look at a theme. So we've got collections of the collections. So you might look at migration, which is a topic that comes up quite a lot with writers, I'm finding, or the sport or newspapers or the First World War, for example. There's a few, I think there's 13 or 14 different themes of collections. So that shows you collection items plus editorial that we've done around the topic. So blogs or exhibitions, that kind of thing, or learning resources as well, because we have an education section. So if you're a teacher and you want to use Europeana material in the classroom, There's lots of learning scenarios and different ways of using the collections to present them to a classroom. Like I said, there's also on that page the frequently the most popular items of the last day or two. And that's a really nice way of browsing because you'll always get something unexpected in there. Or if you want to search for a particular organization, you can look at the list, see if your local museum is in there. Use that as a starting point. It's just like the best thing to do is just go there and explore. It's not a difficult website. There's not lots of places you can, click on, and you can't break anything. So just go and enter something, and have a go. And people often find that in their words, they've gone down a rabbit hole before they've even realized it. You click on one thing and it leads to the next and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I would just say, just go and have a go. And there is a help section on the website as well. So if you are stuck or you want tips on how to search, you can just click on the help, and there's a really handy page there that tells you some of the things that you can do.
Yeah, obviously I had to go check it out when we were working on setting this up, and kind of by coincidence, I got presented with something I love, which is cutaways of buildings. Like,
Okay.
they'll show like a castle, but then like, with a wall removed so you can see all the rooms in the castle and how they would be used and stuff like that. So there went my evening, because then I was like, oh, look, I can look for more cutaways of buildings. Is there a recency consideration? Like if somebody's doing a book that's set in current day, would they find things there, or is this more historical? What would be the time period covered?
Yeah. So we do have things from, I don't know what the earliest is, but many centuries ago. And then the newest stuff is modern. The only issues you might have is if you wanted to reuse those items, if you wanted to use them as cover art, include them in as illustrations or something, because what tends to happen is that copyright is still in place for things that are new, that have been around for the last, it depends on the country, 80 to 100 years or so. So yes, collections exist around modern things, but there might be slightly more processes to go through if you wanted to actually reuse. But you can still use things for inspiration. You can still use things for research and cite where you got it. That's absolutely fine.
Are these collections, especially the free materials, are they available regardless of geography? Like, would American
Yep,
users be able to go in
absolutely.
there?
Yep.
Does Europeana provide any guidance in terms of navigating copyright?
Okay, so it can be quite complicated because it does vary from country to country. So you would have to check, I think, the rules for the country that you're in and the country that the material comes from. But as I said, every item in Europeana has a rights statement, so you can see what can be done with it. And we group it into sort of three categories. So there is, can I use this? Yes. And that will be anything that's in the public domain, which means it's just free for you to use. And that can be things that have come out of copyright, maybe older things. But there are also what we call Creative Commons licenses. And Creative Commons is something that's not just used by Europeana, it's used by lots of organizations as a way to make copyright and licensing more consistent. So under there, there's a Creative Commons 0, which means basically the rights holder has given it to the public domain effectively. It's pretty much the same as public domain. And then there are things like CC BY, which means you can use it, but you have to say where you got it from, who it's by, or has an SA in the rights statement, which means share alike. So anything you make with that item, you should license the same way that the original item has been licensed. And then we have a group called Can I Use It? Yes, with restrictions or with considerations. I can't quite remember what the wording is. So that's things that are available, but perhaps are not to be used commercially, or they're not to be no ND, no derivatives. That means if you had an artwork, you couldn't chop part of it out and just use that. You have to keep it whole and use it all together. And then you've got the things that are in copyright. So you can still use them if you get permission from the copyright holder. Just Europeana can't grant that permission because we don't own the items. We just display them. All the rights come from the individual institutions that hold the items.
I was just reading an article about trends in cover design, and it seems as if currently there's a trend toward taking, I guess, things that are out of copyright, old paintings of the masters or whatever, and using them as a background with very little treatment. It's just like either the painting, more usually like just a fragment of a painting, like The Woman on a Swing. I can't remember what the book was, but there was, a large painting that had sort of like a an idyllic forest scene, and in one corner there was a woman on a swing, and somebody cut that, the cover designer cut that out and just put text over it. And I was like, that's a pretty simple way to make a cover design, as long as you're skilled in like matching the image to the genre and matching the text to the tone and so on. But that's a nice option for people who are looking to do their own cover design.
Yep. And in our filters, you can also filter down by the image quality. So obviously you want to have quite a high quality image if you're going to use it for design. So you can even filter down. So you're only getting results that are going to be a reusable quality, which are quite helpful.
And you were talking a little bit about activities that are tied into Europeana. Talk a little bit more about that.
Okay, so I already told you about the monthly writing workshops. We're also starting to do something similar with Shut Up and Write, which is, I don't know if people know about Shut Up and Write. You can.
I don't know that, no.
You don't know it. Okay, so there are hundreds of Shut Up and Write events. And what it means is that you join either an in-person or an online event. And it's mostly to do with accountability, really, and companionship. You get together and you shut up and write, so it isn't a workshop, but we are starting a Shut Up and Write with European arts and culture. So you'll join online and you'll have a quick hello and say what it is you're working on. And then we'll have some time to just write quietly. And during that time, I'll show on screen some artworks or items from Europeana. So if you want to look up and take inspiration from them, you can. And if you just want to carry on with your own project, you can. So that's a nice one as well. And then if you want something a bit more interactive, we have our story dice. So we have a PDF download, which gives you something you can print out at home or in the office, or depending how high quality you want to do it. And then all you have to do is cut out these templates, fold them up, and you've got a little box. And on each side of the box or the dice is a picture. And the pictures are all taken from the Europeana collections, and each dice has a theme. So there are 6 dice, and you've got one with different characters. So faces from artworks or photography that are sort of different ages. You can use that to think of a character. And there's another similar one with different emotions on the faces. There's one with items of transport. There's one with different landscapes and weathers that you could use for mood or setting. What else was there? Oh, there's one with random objects, and there's one that has suggestions for genre. So obviously you can use these dice however you like. You can just roll one and write something about it, or you could roll a few and try and write a story that involves all of them, or you can use it as a group or with children, for example, and tell a story around the circle, and each one roll a new dice and see what they can bring into it. There's lots of different ways that you can use them. So if you run workshops or perhaps you work with young people, they're really nice to use as well.
I did actually want to ask a question that's tapping more into your background in creative writing than necessarily specifically your role at Europeana, and that is advice for people who maybe have gone down the rabbit hole. Now they know everything there is to know about stilettos or castle architecture, whatever it is. And I think the tendency is always want to put all of that in your book, put all of that in your fictional work. Do you have guidance for people about, they've gotten very, very excited about what they've learned about Europeana, but when is it no longer a good idea to just add more and more of what you've learned into a work of fiction?
I'm not sure anybody can answer that question. I think it's really exciting, isn't it, to have all of that information at your fingertips and to be excited about it. So maybe to begin with, you could just lean into that, put your novel draft aside and just, find out what is interesting to you out of the reams of things that you've discovered. Maybe do a little, I'm a big fan of free writing. So do a little bit of free writing on one particular element of it and see which one or two elements of your research really sing to you and put them in. And I think leaning on the detail when you have, work to do with your characters or your location. So you don't have to put it all in, but find that really bespoke little detail about something that you can use to sort of manifest all the rest of it. So it's useful for you as the writer to know all of that, but actually you might conjure a lot of that by just picking out a particular detail or using it as seasoning here and there, rather than, oversalting everything.
Yeah. I like that idea of sort of separating in time the research work from the writing work, because I can imagine, I'm sure I've done this myself, where now I'm writing a scene that takes place in Chicago and I haven't been to Chicago for years. So I go on Google Maps and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, there's I'm on Street View. So I'm saying, oh yeah, it's next to a drugstore. So I put a drugstore into the story. But I think maybe a better idea is to separate out the research and the writing in time so that you do the research one day or maybe 1 week, and then you're writing the scene later. And there's going to be that telling detail like you're describing. That's what's going to stick in your mind. You might no longer remember that there was a drugstore next door because it really is not important, but you remember that there were trash bags on the ground or something like that. And that what sticks in your mind is maybe an indicator of what's going to be that telling detail.
Yeah, I think that sounds a very sensible approach. Yeah, if there's something that you remember after it's sat in the drawer for a week, then that may be the detail that you want to include. And if not, and you're not quite sure, go back and get a highlighter and just highlight the bits that stand out to you or that you're excited to remember again once you're reading back through everything. I think
Yeah.
that's quite nice. Yeah.
Other activities related to Europeana, are there other ways you can advise people that they might take the greatest advantage of those resources?
So I have one more event to tell you about, which is our digital storytelling festival, which is of interest to anybody of a creative bent, not just writers. It's all to do with storytelling, and it's a 2-day online festival that usually happens in May. And we have a program of talks and workshops and sort of social moments there when we bring together examples of good storytelling from around the web. And it doesn't have to be about cultural heritage. It can be about anything as long as it's good storytelling. And that's really good fun. And associated with that, we have a creative online residency, which does have a writing strand. So we've run this for 3 years now, and each year we have a different theme. So the first year was LGBTQ plus stories, and the second year was journey, and this year we've done food. So what we do there is we have a number of specialist mentors who produce artistic works in different formats. So there's the writing, which can be fiction, non-fiction, poetry, memoir, whatever you like, as long as it's new writing. And there's things like digital animation, gift making, stop motion animation. We've got collage art, video and social media, and 3D. So quite a lot of exciting artistic, creative endeavors go on there. So that's a nice one to look out for if you feel like you would like to apply and join us next year. We only have a handful of places each time, but I've been the writing mentor for that for the last 3 years. And it's been really fascinating to see how people engage with the collections and how they bring them into their storytelling. So this year, for example, we had one example was an artist, a visual artist who has a physical exhibition coming up to do with beer. It's in a brewery, and she's invented a beer god. So what she wanted to do with the residency was to sort of research the history of beer and the stories around beer, and to create a kind of narrative for her artistic exhibition. So that was really nice. And somebody else who runs a guest house in Corfu and does a lot of writing about the restaurants and the food that's available on the island, and did some research into red sauce. And what comes up time and again is that people, they like the resource and they look at the research and they look at the history of things. And then I have to keep reminding them to bring in their personal stories as well, because that's what really makes these stories come to life, is their personal experiences and their connections. So with this story called Food and the Red Sauce, we encouraged him to delve into his grandmothers on the island who both had this version of red sauce. But they were different depending on what they came from different parts of the island and what was available in those parts of the island, and how actually that corresponded with his memories of their personalities as well as grandmothers. So we encourage people to connect with their own experience as well as use the historical collections, because I guess that's really what the cultural heritage collections are there for. They're there to teach us about humanity and what we can do differently in the future and what we've done in the past. And we can't do that if we don't connect with ourselves as well and our personal experiences. So those two things coming together, I think, is always really quite powerful.
And the digital storytelling, I think that a lot of the listeners of this podcast are going to be, nonfiction writers or novelists or short fiction writers, what have you. And so storytelling sounds very familiar, but digital storytelling, I'm gathering, is the idea that you have many more resources than words on the page in order to tell that story. Am I interpreting the digital aspect of that correctly?
Well, what I think it means different things to different people, but to me, it's just storytelling, but with like modern resources, like you say, you know, web pages, blogs, photography, video, whatever you might want to use. But to me, the important part is the storytelling, because really the digital and the technological element should sort of melt into the background so that the story is brought to the front, and the technology can help us to do that. But it's always, sometimes people get a bit carried away with the technology, and I think people get a bit intimidated by the technology and not want to go near it. And so I think emphasizing that it's the storytelling that is always at the heart of it, and the storytelling is about humans and emotion. That's what I always like to focus on.
It's very interesting because there have been a couple of recent episodes where there's really been more of an emphasis on all the different forms that storytelling can take. And for example, I believe that the episode that will go out right before this one will be with David Viergoots, who has a company called Epistolary, and one of their products is called Scare Mail. And so, he's sending out to his pool of customers ostensibly they're intercepting letters that are being sent between characters. And I think that sense of bringing things that in the past we would have just thought of as words on the page into a more connection with the world around us is something I'm seeing a lot of. Like the physicality of it is appealing. And even if you're doing it digitally, adding those other aspects seems very appealing in a way to differentiate ourselves, especially as indie authors from, there are lots of books out there people can pick. And how can you tell your story so that it's offering something that the consumer isn't getting, is new and fresh for the consumer? So I love everything that Europeana has to offer. And of course, everybody's homework assignment is to go to the website and start poking around. So Beth, thank you so much for coming and talking about Europeana. And please remind everyone where they can go to find this resource and more about you online.
So the website is Europeana.eu. So that's Europeana, Europeana.eu. And you can find all the resources that I have just mentioned on there. Or if you want to just Google Europeana Writers Room, that's where you'll find the monthly writing workshops or Europeana Digital Storytelling Festival. Google that and you'll find that these things should pop up fairly easily. But I would just say, yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I really hope that everybody will go and have a look at Europeana and be inspired and go down rabbit holes and just enjoy it. And would love to know what you find. And if you'd like to know any more, you can contact me. My email is beth.daley, DALEY, @europeana.eu. And I'd love to hear from you. And yeah, once again, just to say thank you very much for having me.
Sure. Thank you so much.